low costs with the amazing low-cost education methodology. But we can talk more about that later on. But for now, that's kind of like the origin story. And so to be sure we are on the same page, here's a couple of examples. Let's see if that host disabled participant screen sharing. I like the dictatorship tendencies, Louise, but if there's any way to put that, then I would have a couple of, yes, perfect. So here are a couple of examples of serendipity. Any ideas what that is here on the lower left? If you want to put it in the chat or say via any ideas what that might be. And yes, Penny, thank you. Viktor Frankl's book is truly inspiring. Very true. It's very true, actually. It's very depressing and uplifting at the same time, which is extremely profound. Louise, Viagra, Colleen, antidepressants, Diane, Dina, antidepressants, sleeping tablets. So we have a nice variety of potential ideas what that could be. So indeed, so a couple of years ago, researchers were giving people medication against angina, the pectoris, the illness, and they realized some kind of movement happening in male participants' trousers. And so what would we usually do? We'd probably say, oh my God, that's embarrassing. Let's either ignore it or let's find a quote unquote better way to cure angina without that quote unquote side effect, right? They did the opposite. They said, you know what, that's unexpected, but there's probably a lot of men in the world who might have a problem in that department. So why don't we develop a medication around this? And this is how unexpectedly so Viagra became one of the best-selling medications of all time. This is the sildenafil part of it. Any ideas what this might be here on the right? Chicken fryer. Peter Block says, Frankel gave me life. Peter, I'd love to learn more later in that regard. I'm sure, you know, it's fascinating how Frankel gave us, I think, so much kind of this pragmatic optimism, right? So this kind of idea that, I always loved this idea that of the flight instructor, where the flight instructor told Frankel, if you want to fly like this, you have to start like this because the wind will pull you down. So if you start as a realist, you end up as a depressionist, but if you start as an optimist, you end up as the real realist. I always found that fascinating. But Peter, I'd love to learn more later on what Frankel inspired in you. Obviously, your work has been. He told me to quit whining. That's a great one. That's a great one. That's exactly the case, right? If you are Viktor Frankl and you survive the concentration camp, I think we can all somehow, you know, be okay with the situations we're in. But so thanks so much, Peter. And so Jackie Warner, yes, sweet potatoes. That's exactly what it is. So this is a sweet potato washing machine. And so the sweet potato washing machine, a couple of years ago, a company in China called Haier, they produce washing machines, refrigerators. They received calls from farmers, and the farmers told them, your crappy washing machine is always breaking down. So they asked them, why is it breaking down? Well, we're trying to wash our potatoes in it, and it doesn't seem to work. So what would we usually do? We'll probably try to educate the customer, right? We'll probably tell them, don't wash your potatoes in the washing machine. They did the opposite. They said, you know what? That's unexpected, but there's probably a lot of farmers in China who have a similar problem. So why don't we build in a dirt filter and make it a potato washing machine? And that's how serendipitously so the potato washing machine became an innovation. By the way, up to 50% of innovations are serendipitous, right? Probably a lot of, when we think back on our lives, right, the way we met the love of our life or so might be serendipitous. So the point is that a lot of things in life are serendipitous if we see it as them or not. And the quintessential example, just to close that off, is probably, you know, imagine you have erratic hand movements like I do, then you spill a lot of coffee. And so imagine you spill coffee over someone in a coffee shop. They look at you slightly annoyedly, but you sense there might be something in there. You don't know what it is, you just sense there might be something there. And now you have two options, right? Option number one is you just say, I'm so sorry. You walk outside and you think, what could have happened had I spoken with that person? And option number two, you start the conversation and, you know, that person turns out to become the love of your life, your co-founder, you name it. The point is our reaction to the unexpected, our making the accident meaningful is what makes that possible. We can talk later if we have more time about all these other examples. TEDx Volcano is one based on that volcano that came up and so on. But for now, what all these examples and all the examples we looked at have in common is that it's always the same process. It's very different from blind luck, right? Blind luck is this idea, the things that passively happen to us, right? Being born into a good family, things like that, or at least a loving family, things like that we can't really choose, right? They are passive. But serendipity is about active smart luck. It's all about this idea that there's some kind of serendipity trigger, right? So spilling the coffee, movement in trousers, farmers calling up and saying your washing machine is breaking down. But then we have to do something with it. We have to connect that to something meaningful. We have to imbue meaning in it. And then we also have to somehow have the tenacity a lot of times to actually take it through and make something with it. It's not enough to just run into unexpectedly the love of your life or your potential co-founder. You have to go on dates, right? You have to actually do something with it to then turn it into serendipity. And it's fascinating how long a lot of times the incubation time of serendipity might be. You might read something 10 years ago in a book and now like run into someone and say, oh my God, such a coincidence. I read about this 10 years ago. Now we should do a podcast about it, you name it. The point is, it's always the same process of spotting and connecting the dots. And the beautiful thing of this is we can create more serendipity triggers. So we can make accidents more meaningful. We can create more meaningful accidents, but also we can learn how to connect the dots and make more of these accidents meaningful. In the organizational context, we can create and conditions for serendipity, and we'll talk more about this as well in a second. The problem, of course, is that we tend to miss serendipity all the time. We might not see the trigger, we might not be able to connect the dots, or we might just not have the grit, the tenacity to actually go through with it. What do I mean with this? So there's a couple of experiments, one of which is one of my favorites because it's been replicated in different occasions and with different kind of situations in mind. But so what I'd love to learn is, of the people in the room, if you want to put in the chat, do you consider yourself to be a lucky person or an unlucky person? If you just want to put in the chat, lucky or unlucky. Do we have a lucky or unlucky? JC is lucky, Karen is lucky, Louise mostly lucky, Claudine lucky, Linda lucky. Alison has been both in her life, yeah. Colleen lucky, Lebongan super lucky. Rosie lucky, Kim lucky, both. So that's an interesting one, right? So it seems like we're mostly a lucky room, and then some of us feel like sometimes we have bad luck, sometimes we're lucky. So it's kind of like both. So the interesting thing is that what's great is that those of you who feel that they are relatively lucky, it's more likely that you will be luckier in the future. Why is that the case? Well, because a lot of this is about framing, right? The way we look at the world and the alertness to the unexpected. And do we expect the positively unexpected to be there? So what do I mean with this? Let me give you one example, one experiment, where they took people who self-identify as very lucky. So people who say, good things tend to happen to me. And then people who self-identify as very unlucky. So people who say, bad things tend to happen to me. I'm always in accidents. And yeah, we all know both kinds of people, I guess, in our lives. And then they pick one of each and they say, walk down the street, go into a coffee shop, order a coffee, sit down, and then we'll have our conversation. What they don't tell them is that there's hidden cameras along the street and inside the coffee shop. There's a £5 note in front of the coffee shop. And inside the coffee shop, there's one seat empty next to this extremely successful businessman who can make big dreams happen. Now, the lucky person walks down the street, sees the £5 note, picks it up, goes inside the shop, orders the coffee, sits down, has a conversation with the businessman, they exchange business cards, potential opportunity coming out of it. The unlucky person walks down the street, steps over the £5 note, so doesn't see it, goes inside the shop, orders the coffee, sits next to the businessman, ignores the businessman, and that's it. Now, at the end of the day, they ask both people, how was your day today? And so the lucky person says, it was amazing. I found money in the street, made new friends, and, potentially an opportunity. The unlucky person just says, well, nothing really happened. And that's the point. You can put people into exactly the same situation, and they will have extremely different outcomes depending on how they look at the world and what they expect to see and how they frame situations. We'll talk more about this in a second. Also, by the way, the second part, right? Talking with a businessman, that's a little bit about extroversion. It's more likely to have serendipity if you connect with other people. But, for closet introverts like myself, there's a lot of hope that a lot of serendipity comes from quiet sources, right? From reading a book or taking another street to work in the morning and having an open mind and then seeing in the bookstore this new book and you're like, oh my God, that could be a podcast and things like that, right? So serendipity a lot of times comes from open our eyes to it. Like in this case, I actually find surprisingly much money in the street. It's interesting how much money people drop. Again, like if I think about myself, the amount of money, I don't have a lot of money, but I drop a lot of money. And so it's fascinating how much you can find once you expect it, right? And that's really at the core. I'd love to do a little experiment with you to see to talk about a couple of the biases that we have. When doing this, I need everyone's collaboration. It won't work if not everyone collaborates. And it's one of these things, you know, it might as well fail. So we have to practice what we preach, right? That sometimes things might not work out. So then we have a secret as a group that it didn't work. But so essentially what I'd love to do is, what do you think is the probability, if you want to put that in the chat, what do you think is the probability that two people in this room, let's say in this room, we're 66 people in the sense of it's you, so yourself, and the person who's closest to you. So being it, you know, your husband or your mother or your father, whoever is closest to you, picture them with you in this room, right? So let's say we are in a room now with, is it 66 people? So in this room of 66 people, what do you think is the probability that two people have the same birthday? 66 people, what do you think is the probability? Is it 5%, 10%, 17%, 15.5%? Who's good at maths? Can anyone? Nirala says 20%. Do we have lower, higher bidders? Estelle, 100%. Peter, 34.667. That's very specific. Marita, 10%. Penny, 45%. Madeleine, 45. 80, 99, 60, 50, 33, 18. So we're seeing here 25, 40. So we're seeing here that we probably, the majority assumes is relatively low, right? And what we would usually do is probably we would say is 365 days in the year, right? And there's 66 people. So we divide that by each other and we come up with a very low probability that two people in this room have the same birthday. Now, I need everyone's collaboration for this. Can everyone please put your own birthday, so just the day and the month, and the birthday of the person you love the most next to you? So two birthdays, right? So in my case, it's February 22nd and June 6th. And so if anyone sees any overlaps, please let us know who the overlaps are. I'm not that good at spotting quickly, but those of you who are good at spotting quickly now, any overlaps, please let us know if you see an overlap between two people. So again, if everyone wants to put their birthday and the birthday of that person they love next to them, and then if you see any overlaps between people, please let us know in the chat or by telling us. Anyone sees anything already? Let's see. Who's good at spotting? Who's anyone who? Oh, Penny has seen one. Yeah, Penny, what have you seen? So we have Pakeng and Tasneem on June 5th. We have 31st of December twice. That's great. So we have two pairs. Penny, was your pair the same or a different one? We have 6th of December twice. Thank you, Penny. Wonderful. And so now we have 3 pairs already, right? And we have 12th of July too. So we have 4 pairs, right? So if we would go on now, and please, if you still see some, please let us know. Oh, we have 3rd of March too as well. So now we have 5 pairs. If you see more, please let us know. But the point here is, in a group of 66 people, you will always find 4 to 8 or so pairs. And that's incredible, isn't it? Because we said the probability of 1 pair is extremely low, but now we found 5 pairs in this room so far that have that, right? So that is quite unexpected. Now, what's happening here? What's happening here is very similar to what's happening a lot of times in our lives, that we think life is linear, right? We can plan it out, we know the variables, we map it all out, and then we live life to that degree. Well, but you know, there's a lot of things in life that we can't control, that we can't know of, and it's very likely that life will play out differently, even if we don't expect it to. So we don't expect it to, both the positive and the negative necessarily. And so what we just talked about is the birthday paradox. Those of you who are interested, you can Google it, but the whole idea is that it's an exponential function. So it's not a linear function where you know, we divide 365 and 66 or 65. So, but it's essentially, if Louise has 65 people in this room who could have her birthday, Kim still has 64 people, Andries still has 63 people if they didn't have the same birthday yet, and so on. And so it's to the power of. And because it's to the power of, it was almost 100% probability that there would be a pair in this room. In fact, when you have 23 people, the probability is already 50%, which is incredible, isn't it? 23 people, it's a 50% probability that two people have the same birthday. Now, what do I want to tell you with this? What I want to tell you is that we consistently underestimate the possibly unexpected because we don't expect it to be there, even though it is there all the time, because life is exponential in that way, that everywhere there is something. In every conversation, there's serendipity. In every interaction, there's serendipity. In every book, there's serendipity. But most of the time, we don't see it because we might not expect it to be there, or for a couple of other reasons that I'll talk about in a second. Now, I'll just briefly, so that we still have time for a conversation, skim over the other biases, right? So a couple of things that hold us back from serendipity: underestimating the unexpected, functional fixedness, right? This idea, the hammer-nail problem. If we have one approach, like a hammer for the nail, we will always look for the hammer to get the nail in the wall, even though there might be better approaches to actually get the nail into the wall. My favorite actually is post-rationalization. And post-rationalization, I guess we've all done that. Imagine you take your CV to a new employer and you will tell them probably, yeah, and then I wanted to do this, and then this, and then this, and then this. Like you will tell life as if it was a linear journey that you had a lot of control over, versus, yeah, maybe you just ran into someone at a conference who told you about a new job and you unexpectedly landed there. Same in the boardroom, right? People will always be like, yeah, I planned this was my strategy and so on. So yeah, but maybe life was a little bit more like a squiggle, right? Rather than a straight line. And so what happens a lot of times is that we airbrush serendipity out of our lives because we want to have this kind of, we want to portray control. We want to portray that at every step we had full control. One of the reasons why I'm so excited about this work is that I want to give an active vocabulary to people who cultivate serendipity. So to be able to not see serendipity as something that's kind of, because we were not in control of the situation, but quite the opposite, because we created an environment that made it more likely that serendipity would happen as an active leadership skill in a world full of uncertainty. And that's something that comes out a lot of in our work with senior executives, where the idea is that in a fast-changing world, you can give people a North Star, you can give them a certain sense of direction, but you also need to be aware that the unexpected will probably form a lot of the strategy that emerges. And the more we actually own that, and the more we actually are honest about it, the more we can build true connection with people we work with, and also go about this. Now, before I wrap this up, a couple of quick practices, and then we can dive deeper into that in the discussion. But so one of my absolute favorites of how we can actually cultivate serendipity is the hook strategy. And the hook strategy is all about saying, how do I seed a couple of potential serendipity triggers out there that other people can imbue meaning in? And so what do I mean with this? Take Ollie Barrett. He's a wonderful entrepreneur in London. And if you would ask Ollie this dreaded, what do you do question, right? The question that everyone gets at every conference and things like that, he wouldn't just say, I'm a technology entrepreneur. He would say something like, I'm a technology entrepreneur, recently read into the philosophy of science, but what I'm really excited about is the philosophy is playing the piano. And so what he's doing here is he's giving you three potential hooks where you could be like, oh my God, such a coincidence. My sister is teaching on the philosophy of science. You should come by. Oh my God, such a coincidence. We've been hosting piano matinees. You should stop by. The point is we can, in every interaction, seed a couple of themes we're interested in to then have the other person pick up whatever they're most interested in. I'm a big fan actually of doing a serendipity journal, where you write down a couple of themes that you're excited about at the moment. So for example, in my case, it's how do we get the serendipity mindset into as many curricula, into as many organizations as we can. And every meeting I run into, when I'm late, for example, I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like we were just thinking about how to get the serendipity mindset into education, but now I'm here and I'm so excited. And so the point is we can, in a side sentence, like allude to a couple of these things, and then whoever picks it up, and then we can run with it. And the amount of serendipity that comes, especially in conversations where we wouldn't expect it, with the uncle, with the aunts, with the brother of the sister of the mother, where we didn't even know that they would be interested in something, it comes once we give them the opportunity to actually connect with something. The same also, how do we ask questions ourselves? Do we just ask questions like, what do you do? Or do we do it more open and ask things like, what do you enjoy doing? When you go to a fisherwoman in a fishing village and you ask her, what do you do? She will say, I'm fishing, and the conversation's over, right? You don't have a lot in common then. Versus if you ask her, what do you enjoy doing? She might be, I enjoy fishing because I love the endlessness of the sea, and I love how it makes me feel when I'm in the water. And you might be like, oh my God, yeah, I have the same with academia. It's endless knowledge, whatever it is, right? The point is that we find those common denominators once we ask people about the deeper underlying themes rather than what is here. There's a couple of other practices. I think for the sake of this session, let's dive into the conversation. One last one I wanted to mention with you because it comes out of Cape Town. I've learned so much from the work in Cape Town, especially with Reconstructed Living Labs, about reframing. So Reconstructed Living Labs is an organization I'm sure some of you might be familiar with. But if not, they came out of Bridgetown. They created a low-cost education methodology, things like 10 steps to use social media to create your business or things like that. And then what they do is they go into local communities, and instead of asking what's here and what resources do we need, right? So focusing on resourcing, they say, what's already here and how can we make the best of it? Is there something, if there's an old garage, can we use that as a training center? If there's a former drug dealer, fantastic. That person will be creative, resourceful, have amazing social capital. If we can turn them into a teacher, we can turn a community around. And so what's fascinating here is that once we reframe the world away from the idea that we need resources and budgets to the idea that everywhere, every person and every situation has something in them, what happens is that then we see potentiality. We see all the potential dots that we could connect and do. And so our labs scale to hundreds of thousands of people with almost no resources, because what they're doing is they try to enable people locally to create their own smart luck, which obviously is the real empowerment that happens from it. We can dive deeper into this as well. For now, I just wanted to flag that a lot of our inspiration comes out of the Cape Flats, and we're very grateful for that. And I'd highly recommend to visit our labs if you have the chance. Very happy to connect you if you haven't come across them yet. But so it's really a lot around this. And thank you, Louise, for mentioning that there's great learnings from Peter Block in that regard. So Peter, if you want to talk about some of these themes as well, of course, we'd be thrilled to hear more. And Mel says UCT uses their story as part of the social entrepreneurship course. That's fantastic. That's great. Dots connecting. Maybe there's some nice overlaps there as well. But so for now, that's really just a couple of practices. And I want to close on the one that I've seen work best in organizations, just to also have one idea in organizations. We've done a lot of work with purpose-driven leaders. And one of the things that they do extremely well is that they are extremely good at saying, here's a sense of direction. If we are MasterCard, we're not just a payments company. We want to bring 500 million people into the financial sector. So we focus on that kind of financial inclusion, big purpose and big goal. Here's a North Star, so that allows you to connect the dots to it. But also, hey, here's an approximate strategy, but I need everyone to chip in and to come up with new ideas of how that strategy emerges. And so what is done here is that people are incentivized to look out for the potential potato washing machines out there, and it's not a threat to the authority of the leader, but actually part of the process, because you're saying from the beginning, the unexpected is part of our plan. And I think that's really at the core of it, and that brings us back to Viktor Frankl, right? The idea that we can not always choose the situation we're in, but always our response to it. And so he never really said it, but it's been attributed to him, and the spirit certainly is exactly what he says, which is that between stimulus and response, there's a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response, there's our opportunity to grow and to thrive. And that's really the spirit of all of this. That's the spirit of the book. My editor tells you to mention that this book is out. The Serendipity Mindset brings together a lot of what we talked about, both the kind of scientific grounding, the exercises, the stories. So that's the Serendipity Mindset book. And then to Louise's point, there's an international paperback. So the paperback is the Connect the Dots book. The reason is that Penguin wanted to say, hey, look, the hardcover is kind of for people who are very excited about serendipity. And then the trade paperback is really kind of like going into the broader kind of mainstream of saying, how can people get more serendipity in their life without necessarily, having heard of the term serendipity. And so that's the reason we chose another title for the international paperback. But so that's the two books right here. Thank you so much again for having me, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the conversation.
So Christian, I'm going to just kind of lead us into the conversation, and I know you've only got 20 minutes left with us, but many people on the call have been involved. So it's interesting because Marlon and I were both nominated for this Thinkers 50 award last year, and because of the work we're doing, and I've been interested in trying to kind of, what is the theory behind the movement building we've been doing in South Africa with the support of many people on this call. And in your book, I kept thinking, it's because we've been doing this. So for the first time, I'm understanding our work. Our project is Partners for Possibility that many of us have been involved in, but it's because we've been doing things that have been driving people crazy. So I want to just talk about one of them. We've been saying that our work is multifaceted, and then we very clearly identified how is it multifaceted, because what we've realized is every time we talk to a potential funder or a supporter or a researcher or someone who wants to tell a story, they will typically respond to one of the 6 facets. They don't, they might not be interested in leadership development, but they might be interested in community development, or they might be interested in the role of business in society, or they might be interested in cross-sector collaboration, so this is kind of multifaceted. We said that our work is like a diamond, and I think this is at the heart of some of this thinking around serendipity, because we describe our work to people as a multifaceted diamond. But then the moment you talk to a marketer, they get stumped. They go, no, we can't talk about 6 things. You have to choose one. And so I'm curious to know whether you've come across, because what you are saying is not in line with traditional, for example, marketing theory. Have you come across that?
Well, it's a fascinating question, right? Because I come from Germany. I love focus. I love planning. I love mapping things out. I love having one goal and going through with it and not being distracted, right? So I'm completely there. And at the same time, and I think that's the fascinating thing, right? That we've seen a lot in our research, that it's really about finding the right balance between saying, this is the bigger picture, the purpose, and that has to be crystal clear when we're running an organization. Like, there can't be ambiguity in terms of, oh, we do a little bit for that and a little bit for that. No, like, what is the kind of bigger idea of what we're doing here, and how's that very clearly focused on that? Like with a marketer, right? Like when you're selling a vacuum cleaner, like it's about the vacuum cleaner for now, right? And so you try to figure out, like, how do I get that vacuum cleaner into someone's hands? But then the way you do that, right? The way you do that, that's where we can plant the hooks, right? To your point, like every person has their own story, and so we want to find the connection point to their story, right? So if I'm RLabs and I'm saying, and by the way, Louise, that sounds like a great project, so kudos for that, and I'm very excited, by the way, to be in a room with amazing community builders like this, and I do hope we might find some unexpected overlaps also in our works. Any excuse to come back to South Africa, always in. But so I think that there's a lot of value, right, in having a clear kind of idea of where we're going in terms of sense of direction as an organization, and then at the same time, really this kind of openness to what are some of the hooks that we want to set with different types of people. Like, I talk very differently, right, to an investor, then I talk with a government minister, then I talk with the person who's in the Cape Flats. And I think that's really about trying to figure out what are the hooks that they might find interesting, and knowing that they will be interested in very different types of hooks. And so I think it actually goes hand in hand to say you have an idea of where we're going. To maybe give you an example on the policy level, one of my favorites here is how the states, for example, in the US, responded to COVID, right? The old school leadership style was to say, COVID happens, here's an exact timeline of when we will open up the country again, the state again, and this is the exact kind of things we will do, old school leadership style, setting yourself up for failure, right? Because essentially now, whenever new information comes in, you have to revise the timeline or hide the information because it doesn't fit your strategy, and you would look weak if you adjust it, versus the new type of leadership style being, here's our core principles, financial health and public health, here's an approximate timeline, but I'm telling you in advance that I will adjust that timeline based on new information. Now, when I'm adjusting the timeline based on new COVID outbreaks, I look strong because I always told people this is the responsible thing to do. And I think that's, to me, Louise, at the core of this, that it's not about being distracted by like too many hooks out there and like, oh my God, we are all kind of like trying to do everything at once. No, it's about saying, having clarity in purpose or clarity in where we're going, and at the same time casting different types of hooks. And I'm also a fan, though, as a last point on this, of this idea that I think I work a lot with young people. And as a young person who's like 15 or 20, you might not have a sense of clarity of where you're going with your life. And that's great, because it sets you up for so much serendipity, as long as you're curious and as long as you're open to embracing what you could feel interested by. And so there, I'm a big fan of really, if there's no purpose or no bigger meaning that's there clearly at that point, what is a curiosity that's guiding me? Or is there something that interests me? And I think, Louise, you said that beautifully about your daughter, right? Like, how do you use travel then, for example, to just have the curiosity? I have the curiosity to learn about different cultures. And with that curiosity, serendipity will happen, because there will be these overlaps, because we have that open mind towards it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Christian. I want to open it up. Anybody want to kind of engage in this conversation and share your thoughts, respond to what you've heard? We will go, as soon as Christian leaves us, we'll go into a small group conversation. We'll get opportunity to kind of process what you've heard, but just we've got Christian with us for another 10 minutes. So we want to create an opportunity for anybody who want to make a comment, ask a question. Just unmute yourself and we're going to give you a chance to speak. No, in this amazing group with so many people with strong opinions, nobody wants to say anything, make a comment?
I'll say something.
Yes, Peter.
I just, certain of your sentences are so powerful to me. And you are trying to change the storyline, the narrative. You know, on one hand, you're selling the advantage of surprise, if you can capture it and not be scared. But when you said to give active vocabulary to people cultivating, that's a big deal. Because the dominant storyline now is, like you say, consistency, control, and predictability. And to say, I want to give you a language in which serendipity is to be expected. And then everybody can exhale. I just love that. And I love the idea that the unexpected is part of the plan. And it's beautiful. It's just beautiful, you know. And I wrote on there, but I just say it now because I'm hogging. The space between challenge and opportunity is where your freedom lies. Awesome. I'm learning that in the addiction world, that the most active thing I can do is to understand what pause means. And there's enormous just beauty in all of that. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Peter. And I got goosebumps when you were talking, especially also the last part, right? Really, what is something I also liked, I think someone quoted you here, replace helpfulness with curiosity. Peter Block, I think, Louise, you quoted Peter.
I forgive them.
Yeah. And it's exactly like, Peter, and thank you, that's very helpful also, I think, for me to understand which are the pieces that really like resonate as core, right? In terms of trying to figure out, like, when we have this, as you point out, right, there's so many pieces to this. And so it's nice to know which pieces seem to be the kind of pieces that maybe are more core than others, and that's beautiful.
And I think we all know what those pieces are. We just need your encouragement that we didn't miss it. You know?
That's what I found useful.
And one other thing is you're still crashing into cars. I love it. I want to crash into cars all my life.
Peter, that's what I loved in reading the book was kind of seeing how so much of what I read about my own, it kind of helped me make new sense of my own experience, Christian. That was what I loved about that. It wasn't so much around, you know, here's how to do. It didn't feel like a how-to book. It felt like a ways of thinking and ways of understanding what is already part of certainly my life, but also it kind of said, you know what, if I had to kind of suggest to anybody else who was going to do movement building work, start here. You know, don't start with a traditional marketing course, for example, or don't start with, you know, a course on PR. Start with understanding how we can create these connections and connect the dots. And then you mentioned in your book, you use the term serendipity bombs. Do you want to say a little bit about what you mean by that?
Yeah, definitely. And thanks so much for sharing both, Peter and Louise. I really appreciate it. And I think it's also fascinating, maybe as the last point on that. To me, it's really about, as leaders, I think one of our responsibilities is to give people the license to have that happen, to have the license for imperfection in some way. Because, we only really learn from each other once we can talk about the imperfections, right? Like a lot of times, especially in organizations and families, right? I'm a new father, like I see that all the time. We're all just winging it, right? Like we can pretend as much as we want, but like a lot of time, we're just winging it, and that's okay. Like we're all doing it, as long as we're then having some kind of sense of direction of where we're going collectively in an organization. And so one of the things I think with this work also is the idea to say, if the CEOs of XYZ companies can do it, like maybe all of us can somehow do it, because you do not lose authority when you do it that way. Quite the opposite. Like Tom Linebarger, for example, of Cummins, he would literally say, look, cultivating serendipity to me is the only approach to leadership during uncertainty. Like that's the only way I can genuinely connect with my people. Because if I would tell them I know everything, they wouldn't take me seriously. Like it's the same with like when you're parents, right? You can pretend to your kids that you know everything. They'll pick it up anyway. So you might as well try to bring them into the conversation and say, hey, look, like, I have very strong principles here, and it's non-negotiable that you go to bed at 8 because that's based on our core principles, XYZ, whatever it is. But actually, I also need you to be part of this. Like, I need you to be part of figuring out that XYZ thing. And so I think that's the thing that Peter, I think, beautifully articulated, that it's not about the either or. It's not about losing some kind of authority when you're doing this. It's about giving the license that this is how life is. Like, life is like a squiggle. Life is not like a straight line. And I think as a leader, if we articulate that and give people the license, we can also embed that in culture, right? We can ask people every week in a team meeting, what surprised you last week? And that simple question gives people the license to say, oh, it surprised me that they were using our product differently. And then you're saying, great, that's not bad, that's great. It's not questioning our marketing plan, it's the opposite, it's being open to customers. Peter, I saw you unmuted yourself. Is there, did you have a thought or?
No, just thank you.
Oh, sorry, okay, sorry.
I think what's beautiful about you is the language that you've constructed to not be another. All right, you're so welcoming to the 8 o'clock at bed, and that's the essence of life, which may or may not be true. And I just love the way you can float between the corporate mindset, which is, a predictable world, the community mindset, the science mindset, all of them. It's just a wonderful glider. I just want to thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. And I think that's really maybe, philosophically speaking, at the core of this work, to say a lot of areas try to achieve similar things, but we have disconnected them. And I think it's kind of, hopefully the company of the future will also be somehow a movement at its core for society, but it's up to us to reconfigure those organizations in some way or the other. So thank you. And I saw Mjoni, you had your hand up.
Yes, I did. My mind is exploding, if I can say that. I think I sort of fell into attending the meeting. I was speaking to Louise now, and she was like, why are you here? I was like, Louise, why am I here? I just remind me again why I signed up, because it was probably in December. And for me, this is just a continuation. I was actually saying, and it actually came in a faith-based way, that in the last couple of weeks in church, they've been talking about how like time is the great equalizer. Like the message has been about time and chance and opportunity. And now I've just landed on this, and it's like, yes, this is like, feels like the next thing. And so I'm feeling, as somebody who is having, being in a corporate environment, and sometimes it can be really crappy, I'm just feeling so energized. I'm going to go get the book. And I'm feeling like that, yes, 2022 is going to be, because I'm like, I've been looking at my vision board from 2021, and I'm like, I've got to go get another canvas, and I've got to. But as I'm listening, and then I saw that quote, I live by that. I was like, yes, since I heard it from Stephen Covey, I tell everybody that I'm like, between stimulus and response, it's my mantra. You choose. And so, and even seeing, I think, Professor Mamkheti's face there, I was like, oh, I'm having a complete fan moment. And I wanted to just like dial it in and like, oh my word, I've never spoken to this lady. Just knowing the power and the just uplifted me, raising. I was like, yes, this is where I was meant to be at 4 o'clock today. And so And I also had to Google again the meaning because, you know, English is my second language. So I had to be like, okay, just to make sure what serendipity means again. But I'm so excited completely. So my little moment of the clutter and the excitement in my mind, just pouring it all out.
So Moni, I think on that, I think just, you know, we are in the business, Christian, of putting the spotlight on South African excellence. You know about our labs. We want to tell you about Partners Possibility, but that's for another conversation. But I am going to ask Mamokgethi whether she would be willing to just quickly switch on her video, because then you can kind of get in touch with another one of South Africa's most amazing leaders. But it looks like she's, I don't know whether she's going to switch on her video.
I'm here.
She's here. Mamokgethi, just because there are lots of people who are a fan. This is a fan moment. Welcome. We're delighted to have you with us. And Christian, if you want to kind of get into academia with your book, this is one of the people that you might want to talk to. So in the spirit of connecting the dots, Mamokgethi, your thoughts, your final thoughts on this conversation today?
I mean, I loved it, right? So as Christian was talking, I haven't read the book, Christian. I saw the invitation from Louise in the WhatsApp group and I signed up. But as we were talking, I thought, how do we do this? I mean, being in a university, I'm forever thinking about the kinds of questions that students ask. All right, so this is mainly, many people in the room probably live this way. I saw one comment saying that this is how they've carried on in their lives. Then I thought, can we apply this kind of thinking to a group? Is that a serendipity mindset? If something happens to a group, and I can imagine people who feel that, I mean, there's students or people in our country in particular who feel that everything negative has happened to me. And of course, I believe that anything that is, any crisis that comes, that we experience is never against us, it's for us. It may be painful at that time, but it's for us. And I always say to students, it is for us. But that's a serendipity mindset in my view, because you are forever you are looking for the easy silver lining somewhere. It is going to come out, and so you have that positive mindset. You are waiting for it. Does it mean the people who never get or see the silver lining? It's only because they don't have a serendipity mindset, or there are other things at play. Surely there are other things at play. And perhaps even in the country, the difficult country that we live in with the poverty and inequality, you know, someone will say, I'm doing everything, you know, I was born in this space, I was whatever, you know, I'm trying to have a positive mindset, but I don't have dinner tomorrow, you know, but maybe that mindset brings in something else. It might not bring you dinner, but it brings you something else because of the mindset that you are in. I don't know what your view is, whether you get a pushback, that you've ever gotten pushback that says, well, that cannot be. It's not just my mindset. There's a lot that's at play, and my mindset is just one. And it's not even a 40% of what makes things happen, what makes things that happen to me come to be. Okay.
I know you need to go, but maybe you want to do a very quick response to that before you leave us.
Yes, absolutely. And apologies in advance for that's the alarm in the other room that tells me, Christian, come into the other room. So we have some nice soundtrack in the background now, I guess, for this answer. But thank you so much for both. I mean, Manoli and Mamokgethi for those extremely interesting points. And I think, you know, one of the things that this work really is about is to say the mindset always has to go hand in hand with removing structural inequality. And it has to go hand in hand with working with governments and others on policy that allow people to have similar starting positions in terms of potential serendipity. So we work a lot with governments, for example, around the question of how do you build serendipity opportunity spaces. So if you're thinking about something like education, for example, it's not enough to just give someone a scholarship. Like if I'm someone from, you know, an impoverished area and I get a scholarship at a great university like University of Cape Town, it's not enough, because afterwards I don't have the networks that the kind of rich kid next door has where I directly fall into a job, right? But I actually now have to work again extra hard to make that next step. And so it's not only about dedication, it's about helping with free mentors, and it's about helping with a couple of other things that set up that ecosystem for having more serendipity. And so to that great point, the way I've been trying to look at it is to say that we have very different starting positions in terms of potential serendipity that can happen to us. And we can do both within our context, work on the mindset, and then more broadly work on removing any kind of societal inequality that could somehow have some people have a different starting position than others. And I think both is at the core of this work. So thank you so much. I had neglected to talk about that part, but I think it's extremely important.
So Christian, we're going to be, we are in the process of arranging the African Leadership Week. It is going to be a space for serendipity. We're going to be cultivating serendipity. So you might want to be in South Africa in September. But on this note, we want to let you go. And so thank you very much. We'll continue our conversation for a bit longer, and who knows what might come out of this conversation. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone. I'd love to keep in touch. I mean, I've genuinely deeply enjoyed this conversation, and I think, you know, with everyone in this room, like who has talked now, I feel like there's so much we could do together. And so please, you know, do keep in touch, and I'd love to continue the conversation. For now, Louise, thank you so very much for bringing us together.
Just before you go, one last word for Helen, who's going to be on the road for 11 months. What should she do?
Look,
have fun. Follow fun.
Yes. Exactly. Follow, like, I feel like, you know, follow that kind of sense of curiosity, and it's almost like the kind of the Little Prince. I would reread the Little Prince and use that kind of sense of curiosity, that everyone has a story to tell, and then I think allowing everyone, and I'm sure you have a great story to tell too, and so I'm sure there's going to be beautiful things emerging. I
would say, Helen, don't listen to anybody else's advice.
Exactly.
I like that too, Peter.
Great to meet everyone.